Yeah. Have in your previous experiences as teaching math, have you ever really dove into that kind of real world math with students?
Yeah, and that's a real good way to bringing in money, bringing in travel, bringing in which is the better deal. Typically in my math class, we'll do a sort of like warm up question. In the same way with my like ELA classes, we'll do like a poem or, just trying to like get everyone sort of centered and thinking. But I'll often do like maybe it's a math problem disguised as a function, like one,
Mm.
one museum charges an entry fee and X amount of money per hour. The other museum doesn't charge an entry fee and X amount per hour. If you wanted to go there for 4 hours, which would be like the better deal? And,
Mhm.
trying to get, I feel like when students have to think of a deal or a bargain or, make a decision about which grocery store to shop at, those are like things they do all the time. Um,
Mhm.
so yeah, that's, lots of examples like that, try not to make them like those sort of brutal word problems that are just like not fun, try to make them like fun and sometimes leave a piece of that question out to just say which one's the better deal and not have the piece that says if you wanted to be there for 4 hours and let students sort of think through their processing and share that.
Yeah, that makes so much sense, is really contextualizing it.
Totally. Yeah.
Absolutely. So now you're not really doing anything with writing in that sense in teaching. Would you say that's correct?
Yeah. I mean, I think maybe because we're a library, we definitely have a lot of people who are passionate about and feel comfortable with writing instruction, writing support. And I think there's a lot less people who feel comfortable with like math instruction and math support. So I've definitely found myself shifting to that where, yeah, it's almost like for me, if there's a writing element or there's a group of people at the center who need writing help, I feel like there's a lot of people I can pull in to say, "Oh, why don't you two like do a little writing group?" Where if it's math, if if I asked who wants to like run this little math group, probably I'm not going to have like a ton of hands up to volunteer.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that's just us. I just think sometimes because it's the library, a lot of people go there because they love books, they love reading, they love writing. So most of the time, people that are there are passionate about that already.
So do you feel that with the students? Or do you feel like some students are really just going there because they heard or they saw a flyer or they asked somebody and it was just like the library has classes to get your GED?
Yeah, I think it's a mixture. I mean, I've really had all types. This summer, I had this guy who was an ABE level student, which means he wasn't particularly close to the GD, an older gentleman who didn't want to do any reading. He just loved math and like loved kind of math puzzles. And eventually, I had to be like, hey, like we do math and reading. You got to do like both. But so there are people who like to go there just to improve their math. There are people who like to go there just to improve their reading and writing so they can like have functional literacy. And then there's people who are there maybe not super interested in like the improvement element, but just want to get their GED. So um,
Mm.
like they don't know that, but in order to do that, they're going to have to work on both their writing and reading and math. So if anything, I feel students are more often forthcoming about like, oh, I'm not very good at math and I'm going to need a lot of practice with that.
Mhm.
Where they maybe feel a little bit more comfortable with reading and writing, but the essay, the extended response, students, I sense a similar like anxiety about like maybe the formality of that.
Mm. Yeah, I felt that too. Um, Definitely with students in different ways. Um, I just wanted to clarify the point you said that maybe there are some students that come in that might just want to get to a functional literacy point, like they don't necessarily desire their GED or are working towards that. So does that mean that your program, when they come into those ABE levels, they don't necessarily have to through to completion, like through to the WIOA classes?
Yeah, that's a great question. We do sort of like goal setting with students that come in. One of the first things we do, in addition to like a sort of bureaucratic form with all their info, is what are some of their goals? And if it is more functional literacy, like some people are like, I want to be able to, help my kid or help my grandkid with their homework. Um, that's that's okay. We check in with people, like those goals shift and change. So it's not like, oh, like, you're putting this one track because you said, in August X. But we definitely try to be mindful of like some people want to get their citizenship, and a part of the citizenship is feeling more comfortable with just like sort of their English. And so it's all, we get lots of different, we've had some people who are like pretty high, like, math functioning, kind of like, really high math students, but they feel like just their like English isn't strong. And so they want to go there, not so much for the GED, but just to practice their English, because they're almost at a level where like they're kind of out of ESOL,
Mm,
like they're not learning English anymore. They've been here for a while, but they want to still be practicing their English. So there's lots of different reasons why someone would come into a learning center. And yeah, some of it can just be they want to be in a group working on their reading and writing skills, and the GED isn't um, their primary goal. And then there are people who like come in and they wanted their GED yesterday, and
yeah,
that's all their focus is. And there's space for both those sorts of students and goals.
absolutely. I do want to spend just a minute just talking about the slow reveal graph. Can you talk to us about just that process and like why you applied to that grant? What was your mindset after you got it? What did you do? Because that was just so cool to see. And maybe it's because I'm just a adult ed nerd now. That's how I found I just fell into it as a person. But I was
Sure.
just like, this is cool. Tell me more.
It is cool. I think again, some of those early experiences in Flatbush, I realized like all the blind spots I had, and I think a lot of people probably in adult ed have, were like one day I'm working with some students on like, a social studies practice GD question, and there's a graph connected to the question, and none of the students knew how to work with the graph, or, knew how to like quote read the graph. So that made me really interested in sort of trying to find or think about like a scaffolded way to work with graphs, to make it a process and not just like, what does this graph mean? So at some point, I believe either Eric or Mark from CUNY had shared or sent out a resource about slow reveal graphs, which essentially are, you take a graph, it could be from the New York Times, it could be from the GED practice book, and you remove essential elements from it. So like you would remove the key, like I did in the most recent PD I did. It The graph has, two lines, because I've removed everything else, and there's just two lines and they seem to be kind of following one another. And you can ask questions of students of just like low floor, what do you notice? And it can even just be like, there's two lines. Okay, great. What do you notice about the two lines? They seem to go up. What do you mean they seem to go up? Well, I don't know. Like here they're low, here they're high. And you can get a lot out of that conversation, and really having students like engage and kind of be more like inquiry based, because they have to be. They also don't, the idea of like, well, I don't know what it means. It's like, well, of course, because it's not complete. So let's try to problem solve. It's sort of like a puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next slide, you'd give maybe a few X values and a few Y values. What do you notice? Well, now we know that the high point is 30. Well, 30 what? Well, I don't know. It doesn't say. Okay. So, and, kind of dependent on the group, dependent on the graph, dependent on the teacher, you can slow reveal the graph in chunks. And it's really, I guess, my experience as like a reading instructor, it made me think of just like chunking a text, like rather than having students read a whole text on their own, maybe we just read the introduction. Okay, what
Mm.
does it seem to be about? What predictions could you make? What do you think the next paragraph may be about? Why are you making those predictions? And so over time, as the name suggests, you slowly reveal the graph. And so with that example I gave you, at some point, those two lines, you reveal the key and you realize it's species and humans. Okay, what does that tell us? Well, there's something going on with the number of species and the number of humans. Does it seem like they're moving up at the same rate? Yeah, they both start low and then they're both going high. What do you think it could be about the species? Well, maybe it's like, the different species, and that one's like a little bit of a bummer because it's species extinctions in human
Mm.
population.
Oh wow.
Um, but even if before you get to that, you reveal that x-axis and students can start saying, so around 1890, it starts going up. And then around 1940, it really starts going up. And there are ways to integrate that to a class. If you learned about industrialization or you've learned about, World War II or like, kind of the baby boom, those dates can be relevant where a student says, oh, well, like, 1950s when, there's a influx in human population. So the goal is to kind of scaffold a graph, scaffold it like a text and sort of chunk I've always sort of hated that verb, but it's a good way to, make predictions like, okay, what do you think the next graph is going to tell us? What new information do we have? You can ask math questions where you only reveal bits of the y-axis or the x-axis and say what gaps could you fill in? Could you figure out what the other notches are just by looking at it? Well, yeah, it seems to be going up by 10. Okay, well, how do you know it's going up by 10? Well, the bottom it's 1,000, and at the top it's 8,000, and then there's 7 notches in between.
Mm.
So kind of trying to have students lead the inquiry. I feel like most teachers probably feel this to an extent. I try to metaphorically or literally like sit on my hands and not lead it too much, and not because I know what it's about, so I'm going to ruin it if I say too much. So and you can do those slow reveal graphs. I found almost on anything you find. In the spring when I went to Albany, I found a really cool graph that was different countries military aid they've received from the United States in the last 10 years. And that graph obviously looked really weird because the last country is Ukraine. So it has almost nothing. And then the last one is like a massive spike. So if that's slow revealed, people are like, all these other ones are a little up and down, but the one to the right, it's nothing. And then it's huge.
Wow.
Okay. Like, so what does that mean? Well, something must have happened this year. Okay. And then as it reveals, oh, it's money. Okay. Well, people are getting money. So that last chunk of that last grouping, something must have happened that required them to get a lot of money quickly. Okay, and then
Mm-hmm.
you can reveal a country or two, Iraq, Afghanistan. What do you know in the news when you hear about those countries? What do you think of? Well, and you can kind of just slowly, as much as it's a slow reveal, it's kind of like a slow build to help students do a lot of the inquiry, a lot of the questioning, a lot of the predictions, also reflecting. Oh, I
Mm-hmm.
thought this was going to be about population, but it turns out it's about money. Okay, so what does that change?
Mm.
Because if
Yeah.
you just, sometimes I feel like you don't realize a graph has so many different layers and components. And if you have a group, particularly if it's a bigger group, it's everyone goes in a different direction at first. So a little behind the scenes teacher stuff. It also, you get to kind of choose the trajectory of how people are going to approach the graph, which can help you focus on some teaching points or learning points.
Wow. All right. This is great. So, you mentioned earlier, and I just want to clarify for viewers, right? Just what do you mean by low floor and high ceiling?
Yeah, that's again another concept I never heard about or never had experienced, but um, it's kind of the idea that some math instructional routines. So slow reveal too is a great routine, and it's one of those things I try to tell teachers like the first time you do it, it may be like a dud. That doesn't mean don't do it again, because then if you do it the next week, students will be like, all right, we did one of these before, we'll try it again. And then, if you keep doing it by like week 6, week 7, you'll have students just guessing, oh, we're doing one of these again. And so low floor means you show that graph, it's got 2 lines. What do you see? I see a box with 2 lines. Perfect. Love it. Or, and it's funny when I do this with teachers because teachers will say, I see 2 sets of data trending upwards over what I assume to be an amount of time. Those are both like valid responses to the image. One's a little bit more at the floor level, the entry level, and one's a little bit more at like kind of a higher ceiling level. So low floor, high ceiling is just something I've learned in those math, when I'm up in Albany for 12 hours, finding activities where even the I'm not a math person people can enter the convo. And then people who maybe feel a little bit more comfortable with math can also enter the convo. It has space for different levels of comfort or proficiency.
Yeah. All right. That's fantastic. Tim, thank you so much for your time. But before we go, is there anything that you would like people to know about you? And this can be outside of, adult ed at all.
Hmm. Anything to know about me? I don't know. I wasn't expecting that question out of the other ones I was sort of ready for.
Oh,
Um,
sorry.
oh no, it's fine. I guess, just sort of in this one thing we were talking about a little bit before, just catching up. Because we met when I was pretty new at Flatbush. Is that I do think it's one thing I've really found exciting is like just continuing to I sort of joke around at the center where I run now. It's an adult learning center. We're all here to learn. Just I've really enjoyed continuing to learn new things and trying different roles out and I guess that's less about me and more just like letting students know you're there to learn, that you make mistakes, creating those environments I really enjoy and look forward to. So I still think of all those very patient, lovely students in Flatbush who let me stumble through teaching math for probably. I remember there was one student who I had stumbled through some algebra stuff, taught it the way I had learned it, which wasn't great, and had done it wrong. And then the student politely at the end was like, "So, sir, this is actually what you want to do," and went up to the board and and did it. And so, but like rather than being like, "Oh, I'm never doing that again," the students were like, you know, more willing to kind of like have it be collaborative. So I know that's not like about me and my life, but I remember just trying to hone into those epiphanies where I was like, oh, I could put a few problems on the boards and let students go up on their own and try to figure it out. And let one student who's pretty comfortable maybe help a student who's less comfortable. And so trying to just always be open to the experiences in different roles and trying to always, I guess, continue to learn alongside the students is like my mantra. Like I probably my staff would be annoyed that like probably every week I say like it's an adult learning center. Like, we're all here to learn. So that to me is just important. And I think it helps get rid of a little bit of anxiety about mistakes for everyone. Like no one's perfect. We're gonna figure it out as we go, and like that's okay.
Yeah, the learning, absolutely. We should all be learning all the time.
Yeah.
Tim, thanks so much for your time. It's great talking to you again. It's been so long. And I would also just extend a hand, please, when next time you come visit New Mexico, drop a line, or better, I don't know, come to our state conference. It's small, it's cute. We we're in New Mexico. We have a good
Sounds great.
time. Yeah,
of course.
it's and just the stuff that you talked about today, that math stuff, it's really definitely needed across the country. We need this more. We need more people who are not quote unquote math people speaking up and how they got to this point of now they are kind of math. Now you're the math guy. You're the teacher leader math guy.
Sure, sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So thanks so much. Have a good
Of
night.
course. Thank you for having me.